Good morning. Topic for today's episode is negotiations. And I hope to give you the key part of I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of negotiations. I'm going to talk to you about the way that I approach a negotiation and the way that and some very important things about negotiating. And of course, we negotiate with so many people in our lives. It's with employees, with partners, with investors, with uh, franchisees, with vendors, all kinds of relationships. So first I want to start that I saw when I was trolling through Facebook or LinkedIn, I saw a episode that I hadn't seen about, and apparently it was the person that the Wolf of Wall Street had been had been inspiration for the movie Wolf on Wall Street, and they showed a episode in the film where he took a pen and he handed the pen to first one and then another of his sales team and said, "Sell me the pen, sell me this pen." And they each proceeded to differently talk about how great the pen was and how beautiful and or low priced or what a great value it was and so forth. And he went on to say that no, that's all wrong. He said, you don't try to sell someone a pen. Your first responsibility in sales is to find out if he needed a pen. So, and find out about him and whether a pen was in his future, and not try to sell him something he didn't need or want, or you're just wasting your time. And he said, the important word is next. If it's not the right person, then you need to go on and find someone that needs that pen or that can be aligned with that pen, and so that's really the way that big picture how I think about negotiations. And often my people ask me, they go into a negotiation and often, certainly, the bigger the negotiation, the bigger the number of people that are generally present or participating. And they continue to ask me, or have asked me often over the years, so what do I want to achieve from this negotiation? And I staunchly have learned to resist knowing what result I want to achieve. And that's because I don't have all the information. I don't know the other group or the opposite, the group or the person we're negotiating with. I don't know what their needs and wants and goals and future is. And what I do know is that they're likely, like almost every human being, they're going to likely come into this negotiation thinking what they want from me. And I'm going to come into the negotiation not knowing what I want the ultimate result of the negotiation to be. And that allows me to be a free spirit and to investigate and come up often with something that works better for them and works better for us. But almost everyone I know goes into the negotiation thinking they know the result that they want to obtain. And so the first advice on negotiation is go in with your mind wide open. Go in with an open mind, and then and then fine tune it as you see whether there's alignment between you and the other side. And that's even when selling a pen. If they're not interested in the pen, there's never going to be an alignment. So most negotiations, or many, if not most, end in no deal, and that's okay. So, but it's so limiting and short-sighted if you go in knowing what you want to achieve. You're mistaken, because there is just so much opportunity to have a preconceived. So first rule is, do not have a preconceived notion of what you want to achieve. Secondly, whoever talks most in the negotiation is probably going to be the lesser hat there in terms of getting the best deal. People talk too much, and one of the things that people say commonly, that I hate it when someone on my team says it, and I try to counsel them, whatever you do, don't say this, and that is, you try and never say to the other half of the other people you're negotiating with, you try not to say that, oh, that's good for me. You don't tell them how what they're proposing benefits me. What your job as a negotiator is find out things that benefit them, and be poker faced and be closed mouth about how much it benefits you. So, because any knowledge that they have that something is benefiting you is going to give them the upper hand in negotiations. So you try to never say that, oh, that's really good for me, that you offer that, oh, that's fantastic, we can use that. And those things are horrible things to say, and you lose it. As you say those types of things, you lose negotiating power. So try never to say anything that is benefiting you, and try to ask questions. Again, your job in negotiating a deal is to find out what's best for the other person. And you know what? Oftentimes the other group or the other person doesn't know what's best for them, and they haven't put the proper thought into the best case for them, and they don't know everything that we are capable of providing. We may have other resources, other tools, other assets that can benefit them in addition to what they're thinking about. So you need to research and find out what's best for them, what's the best outcome of them with them. And you always want to have a deal that's a fair deal to both sides. At the end of the day, a deal needs to work for both sides, and you don't want to take a huge advantage of the other side. And there's all kinds of disadvantages for taking advantage of other side, especially if it's a long-term relationship. You're not going to have a good long-term relationship in a deal if it's an unfair deal. And frankly, that's why I've talked on these episodes in the past, why most franchisors fail. Most 80% of franchisors in this country over the last 30 years have failed, because they set up a deal that's good for them, but it's not good for the franchisee. And as I've said over and over again, if to my franchisees, we both have to make money. If you make money and I don't, this isn't going to work. And if I make money and you don't, this isn't going to work. We both have to have a fair return on investment. And especially in a long-term relationship, if you have an unfair deal, then it's tough enough to have a relationship without the added difficulty of it being unfair, because that will rub the other party wrong forever. So each party has to feel that they're listened to, and that the deal, ultimately, the return on investment is satisfactory. So I'm going to give you an example of a negotiation. My favorite negotiation of all time was, I think, uh, certainly top 10, if not favorite. But we had a deal with, and it was almost 30 years ago, and it was with Chemical Bank, who doesn't exist anymore. So I don't feel bad about discussing the deal. But to make a long story short, we came out of disastrous, the worst tax season ever in my 55-year career in 1995. We had guaranteed loans that to our customers in order to get a higher share of the profits from Chemical Bank. We had entered a relationship with Chemical Bank. They had tested the year before. In 1994 tax season, they tested and they failed. They didn't have a good system. And so we partnered with them in 95, and we, in order to get a higher percentage of the profit, we negotiated a great deal where we would guarantee the losses and our share of the losses, and then we get a higher percentage of the profit. So we would get some part of the profit that they would have gotten if they were taking all the risks themselves and were doing it themselves. So that season in 95, Chemical Bank continued their second year in the industry in lending money to taxpayers for the refund, and they continued their separate tests, and then they did a test with us. Well, it happened to be the biggest mistake the IRS ever made in holding refunds that year. They did a test. They felt as that's true that some returns are prepared fraudulently, and consumers and or taxpayers were taking advantage of them. And so they were going to hold aside some number of tax returns, a minimal number of tax returns, call it out of, let's pretend there were 30 million people getting earned income credit. They were going to hold 1 million, 3%. Well, they ended up holding out of the first batch of tax returns that were sent in before they corrected the programming error. They were holding 30% of the refunds. And they, in addition to holding the refund and checking it manually, they were antiquated software. They could not then pay it to the taxpayers had designated that they pay it to that the taxpayer's refund would be paid to the bank, and the bank would lend them the money based on that probable refund. Well, and then when 10 weeks later, after checking the returns, they actually mailed the refund to the customer. They made almost no corrections, and they mailed all the refunds to the consumer. So you can imagine how many customers came in 10 weeks later after waiting and being angry and mortified and heartbroken that they didn't get this huge check that was there. They used every year to catch up on their Christmas bills or to buy a new car or buy a new appliance. That money didn't come in as expected February 1st. It came in June. And so you can imagine how many came in and paid us the amount for the loan and the amount for back to the bank. And that was virtually zero. So it was a disastrous year, and Chemical Bank didn't really understand the industry well. They'd only been doing it for 2 years, and they were totally disgusted based on the results. This was they had 2 bad years out of 2, and they were testing the whole concept. And so they wanted to get out of the industry, but they sued us at Jackson Hewitt because we didn't have the money to pay them in that tax season. It was just a disastrous year. We almost went bankrupt, and I remember the lawsuit came in on exactly October 31st, the last day of that quarter. We were on a fiscal year ended in April 30th. So that was our 6-month quarter, was October 31st, and we got sued and so we began negotiating immediately, and we were able to get a line of credit from the bank. So we now had some money to pay them some of the $1 million and that they were suing us for. So this is now the second largest bank in the country is suing Jackson Hewitt Public Company. Our stock had been killed. It had gone down from $17 to $2.50. I mean, it was just a horrific time, black period. But they came to us and said, we want to, we negotiated paying them the $1 million. Well, in that process, we found out that was very likely. We asked questions and come to find out they're going to get out of the industry. Well, now they have a portfolio of the $3 million that they had lost with us, and $1 million of that was ours and $2 million of that was theirs. And they also had a similar portfolio of about $3 million that they had done on their own. And they didn't understand that there was agreements back in place in the 1990s, that the banks would cross collect. So if there were each, think of it that Jackson Hewitt had its banks and H&R Block had their bank. And so if a customer came in next year and they came in back into Jackson Hewitt, then we would collect the money and get the money from the previous year out of the refund. Or if they went to our biggest competitor, H&R Block, or even the smaller mom and pops, most of the mom and pops had a bank. And so all the banks were cross-collected. So if a customer wanted a loan ever again in this industry, of their refund, and they did, if they went to, they tried to avoid coming back to Jackson Hewitt because they didn't want to pay us back that amount for the previous year, and they went to H&R Block. Well, in the agreement it says that they can cross collect, and H&R Block Bank collected the money and would pay back our bank. So we knew that we were going to get all that money back and more. And so out of our $3 million, and $1 million was to us, we knew we were going to get $2.5 million of that over the next year or two coming back in out of the $3 million. And we were going to get our $1 million plus we were entitled to profits. So probably call it a $1.5 million. So $1.25, $1.5 million we were going to collect. So we went to them and thought, well, they're getting out of the industry. They don't put any value on that $3 million that they did themselves. So we made a deal that, yes, we will pay you the $1 million. And I don't remember the exact number. We'll pay you $300,000 on December 1st. On January 31st, we'll pay you another $200,000, and on March 15th, we'll pay you the remaining $500,000, because we would have long collected our millions of dollars from the customer. But you have to give us not only the $3 million of accounts receivable from our deal, you need to give us the $3 million of accounts receivable for the ones you did yourself. And they couldn't see any value in it or understand it. So we were able to acquire the whole portfolio of $6 million of debt that was owed by most of that was owed to mom and pops. It wasn't owed to they hadn't come to a Liberty office or a Jackson Hewitt office, rather. Or a Block office. They had their own bank, they came to Chemical Bank. And so we were able over the next year to have just a phenomenal year. We collected out of the $6 million, we collected about half of it in the first year. So our $1 million turned into $3 million. And just in 6 months, not even 6 months. It was, we signed the deal on December and paid the first payment on December 1st. And by March 31st, we had $3 million for our $1 million that we owed anyway, that they would have collected anyway. They would have gotten the $1 million from us anyway. We weren't going to not pay them. We were going to pay them. We just didn't have it when they sued us on October 31st. So for the $1 million that they would have gotten anyway, we received $3 million. It was so valuable to our company, to Jackson Hewitt, that the stock by December 31st had gone back up to $6 a share. So when we were having problems in the summer, it was about $2.50 a share. It went to $6 a share. Well, it was so profitable that the stock was $6 a share, and Jackson Hewitt stock in 1997 season, or I'm sorry, 1996 was the biggest gainer stock on all exchanges, because in 96 and 97 we collected over $4.5 million and $3.5 million was just a gift from them not understanding the industry. So we went in and looked at the situation and understood that they weren't going to do anything with it. They were just going to write it off. And it was extremely advantageous to make that deal. So that was one of the favorite deals that I ever made in my entire career. Now, there are other times we had started doing deals with banks back in 1988, and when the first loans were made in 1988, the IRS did not have a direct deposit indicator, did not tell the banks whether the money was going to be paid or not. And this money is lent to people with very bad credit, but it's based on the anticipation of getting a refund. Well, not all refunds are paid, because some people have back taxes, some people have child support, and some people have student loans. And the IRS is the collection agency for student loans and child support. So some of the money doesn't get paid. So in 1988, the banks started lending money and lost money immediately. So everyone got out of the industry except for beneficial finance. Now, Mellon Bank was getting in, a bank out of Pittsburgh, headquartered in Pittsburgh, was just getting into the industry. And they were just testing with H&R Block. And Beneficial Bank had an exclusive deal with H&R Block in most of the country. And so Jackson Hewitt was at a disadvantage, because we had areas of the country where we had no loan product. And the loan product, to get your money in 3 days for $35, to get a $3,000 refund in 3 days for a fee of $35 is like amazing to people. Wanted that money and they wanted it yesterday. And so it was an amazing competitive advantage. So I had great talks with the guy from Mellon Bank who was in charge of the program and at Mellon. But he said, after discussions we discussed it from about September until October, November. And he said, but nah, we can't do it this year. We just want to test it. We're going to test it with H&R Block. If we're happy with the test, then next year we'll definitely consider using you guys. So I said, can I come in and talk to you? And he said, well, we'll be just wasting your time. And I said, no, if we're gonna do this next year, then we can set the table and prepare to roll it out next year after the season, and I'd love to meet your team. So he finally agreed to the meeting, and the meeting went perfect. We went there, and I took Bill Birchmeyer, my vice president of operations. He had come over with me from H&R Block and just started the previous year, or no, a couple years before that. And we went in to visit them, and the meeting went perfectly. Because the guy that he brought, the head of technology that he brought in to talk to us, said things during the meeting like, "Wow, these guys have an advanced system over Block, and this would be great to do a test with them." And I mean, without even us asking for the test, the guy said all the right things, and so we left after asking for a meeting and going in, and it came out of it perfectly. The Mellon Bank agreed to provide loans for us that tax season. So we instead of being half of our offices in the country not having a loan product, Mellon, just because I asked for that meeting and went in and discussed with them, sat down, negotiated with them for the future, that led to a deal immediately. One last deal in negotiations was in the Walmart deal. That was a phenomenal deal, and I guess if you look back and economically, that was the best deal of my career, because today Jackson Hewitt is in 3,000 Walmarts and does $1 billion worth of business every year. So if you think of billions and billions of dollars of revenue, the Walmart deal was the best deal economically that I made in my career. And we went there we set a goal in January of 1993 to be in Walmart within 3 years. And Walmart wasn't as near half the size. It was about a quarter of the size in number of locations in 1993 that it is today. And yet they were already kicking the butt of Kmart. They both had about the same number of locations, about 13 to 1,600 locations. But when you went in Walmart headquarters, they had a plan within 5 years to have 3,000 locations. And Kmart had a plan in 5 years to have 1,700 locations. And so there was so much, it was so obvious when we went in and visited both Walmart and Kmart in 1993. And I visited Walmart in February and Kmart in March. It was so obvious of the difference in quality of the two organizations. And Kmart was just beginning to fail within a couple of years, and Walmart was exploding. And so we went in to meet with them, and they had been testing with for 1 year or 2 years with H&R Block. And I tried to, in our discussions of negotiating to go into the locations, I thought I made a great point that if you put a H&R Block in a Walmart in Bentonville, Arkansas, coincidentally the headquarters of Walmart, then everyone in Bentonville already knows H&R Block. They already know where they're located. They've been there for 20 years. They know where they're located. They know H&R Block. You're going to just cannibalize that H&R Block location. You're not going to get a lot of new customers because they're going to go to the place they've been going, which is the H&R Block in town on the town square. But if you put a Jackson Hewitt in there, then no one's ever heard of it. It's a competitor. Think of all the business all the thousands of people that tried Block over the years and had a bad experience and left, and they're looking for an alternative. And there's always room for a second player. There's always room for two different, in every industry, there's always room for two different firms. And so we're going to do a lot better. Jackson Hewitt would do a lot better than H&R Block in that location. And my efforts fell on deaf ears. They came back to us later and said that No, they're just going to continue their tests with H&R Block, and then if they like, but they gave me great hope. They said on the way out, they said, however, if we decide we like an industry like income tax, then we like to go with two vendors. And I almost floated on air because there was only two national vendors in tax preparation, so I had to be the other pick. So that sounded to me like, as long as Block doesn't blow the test and turn Walmart off or do so poorly because they're cannibalizing. And Block was also in Sears at the time. So Block was in 600 Sears stores and 50 Walmarts. And we were looking for either a Kmart or Walmart connection back in 93. Well, the negotiation went well in that even though we didn't get in, the guy liked us enough and respected us enough that Sam's Club started they were interested in adding a tax preparation. So he eventually 3 months later or 4 months later, sometime summer, he put me in touch with Sam's Club. And so the following season, we did a test in Sam's Club and we showed what we could do. And that turned into then the following that. So we did well in the next season in Sam's Club. And so that turned into, in late 1994, H&R Block made a mistake, and they had committed to be in 150 Walmarts, and they backed out of 50 Walmarts in December. And so now Walmart turned to me and said, I have these 50 stores, John. We have 50 stores where they had the manager and the employees, and are looking forward to adding a tax preparation. And H&R Block backed out the last minute. Can you handle any of those stores? And we scrambled. And as you know, starting a store in Never Never Land, all over the country, and some in Timbuktu, in December to get ready to open in January, we scrambled, and we were able to come up with 17 locations. And we did such a good job in our locations that within 2 years, Walmart threw H&R Block out of their stores, and Jackson Hewitt had exclusivity. And that small negotiation, that discussion in February of 1993, turned into today over the last 25 years. The only other company that ever had locations in Walmart US to any size was Liberty. We did some at Liberty, but today and for the last decade, all the tax preparation locations in Walmart United States are Jackson Hewitt. As I said, 3,000 of their 6,000 locations, half of their locations are in Walmart, and they do $1 billion worth of business every year just based on that one. Started with that negotiation and always doing what we said we were going to do. Always do what we said we're going to do, and meeting the commitment. And we actually wrestled that relationship away from H&R Block. So again, negotiation. You don't go in with any preconceived notion or a desire for a solution on the first negotiation. Your job is to find out, get to know who you're negotiating with, what they want, and what's best for them. And have a vision of not what's best for them, what's best for you, and where it merges. And remember, most negotiations fail. So it's not always going to come out of it with a solution that's going to be satisfactory to both sides. But go in and be open-minded, and you'll come up with often, or even on occasion, you'll come up with a great solution that neither party had thought of going into the negotiation. talk less, ask questions, and never ever say or indicate, wow, that's really good for me. That's going to make my, oh, that's fantastic. I love that. Don't, when they're telling you, they're going to tell you why they're good for you, and you're going to tell them why you are good for them. But never admit that, uh, as little as possible and with as little enthusiasm as possible. Admit that this is great for you. It'll give you it will give them the upper hand in negotiation. So that's my episode on negotiating. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Everyone have a great week.